advisor to top executives from multiple multinational and large companies and some regional health systems. And she's worked with multiple governments and worked with the UN program, the UN Development Program, and consulting with COVID leaders, including in Cambodia during the transition after the Khmer Rouge. She's also a founding member of the Teleos Leadership Institute, which is where she joins us from today. And she's going to talk to us about defining roles, what really is the difference between a mentor and a coach. So join me in welcoming Frank Johnston.
Good morning. Well, is everybody sitting near somebody? So we got you to come forward. Now I'm going to make sure everybody's got a buddy, because we're going to be talking about relationships, right? And coaching, mentoring. So I'm serious. If you're not sitting next to somebody to talk to, move yourself towards someone. Find a friend. It can be just a friendly person. Friendly face. You don't need to know each other well. And if you know each other, like just take a minute and introduce each other. Introduce yourself. Or say good morning to each other. So my kind of passion is relationships and fostering kind of healthy relationships in the workplace of all different kinds. So that's the space that I'm coming to you from. So the doctorate was in psychoeducational processes. Anybody knows what that is, but it's basically that you can teach and learn psychological skills, and one of which is leadership. So I've spent now close to 30 years in this space of trying to understand what makes for great leaders and healthy relationships in the workplace, and what's our responsibility as a human being who's got impact on other people. So our responsibility is an ethical thing, it's a set of behaviors, a set of attitudes, and then there's some certain roles. So Heidi graciously invited me here this morning to speak to you about a place of confusion for many people, which is coaching and mentoring, and what does this all mean anyway? When am I a manager? When am I a coach? When am I mentoring somebody? And when I'm doing it to them, or I'm receiving it from them? So that's the space that we're going to explore here. In the context of ever-changing healthcare, right? Ever-changing, fast-moving, both clinical practice and all the leadership and organizational dynamics that come along with the changes that are happening here, no doubt, and certainly outside of here, which are new pressures that have us working faster, harder, longer, whatever it is that we'll talk about after I leave when we get to stress. Right? The stress is a huge factor, but I don't have to teach it to you right now, because Dr. Akins is going to do that later. All right, so I'm just going to set this up a little bit, and then we're going to do an exercise, and then a little more talking, and then some chatting. We're going to ask some questions. So I'm going to figure out where it gets complicated for you. So, mentors. How many of you have ever had a mentor? Great. Have you had many mentors? Have you had excellent mentors? Have you had dysfunctional mentors? Yes. Right? Okay, so really the classical difference between mentoring and coaching is very simple, which is the use of expertise. So when you're the mentor, you've got some expertise, and you're imparting it, or some people are trying to extract it from you. Right? Might you know something more than I do, and please teach me by using this skill. And it feels good to be a mentor very often, because you get to be the expert. You get to be the elder. Every culture has elders, and they try to impart wisdom. That's what they're there to do. So the trick is, when you try to add coaching, and I'll talk about it at length in a minute, is that you actually have to change your approach. You have to let go of all that expertise and that part of you that wants to give advice, and just let it go. Like, put it aside. And it's very hard to do, especially when you've been raised in systems that value this expertise-based mentoring. Does that make sense? Right? So coaching is really a different art and it is an art, of trying to support somebody in their own coming to terms, their own acknowledgement, their own sort of self-awareness to figure, what is it that I want to do? You know, how do I want to approach something? And by doing that, by adding coaching to your repertoire, you're strengthening an individual's ability to exercise efficacy. Like, I'm going to go after something, right? Or I'm going to try something different. That I've come to that recognition about that I want to do it, as opposed to being told by the mentor, go do this and then that and then this and then that. Does that make sense? That's the fundamental difference, is how do I work with you in such a way that I help you raise your own awareness and your own motivation to go out and do something. Versus, I see that, you know, here's the path that I took. You should do the path that I took. I'm giving my advice based on my experience. Now, of course, it's hard to mentor people when they're doing something that you didn't do, which is why we want to add coaching to our repertoire, because there are things that we don't know, right, as a mentor. Right? I don't actually know how to tell you how to get that new fellowship because I've never done that. But I can support you, switch to a coaching role, in figuring out who might be, you know, who could you ask for that answer. So it's really just a shift in a relationship. So you can see the mentor is, you know, basically providing advice. Develop, you know, is a good role. I'm not saying keep mentoring. Keep mentoring, please, right? Because it's an important relationship. It's just not the only way of approaching developing other people, right? So we're talking about adding something. It's interesting that coaching is arriving to healthcare these days, leadership coaching. And I'll talk about different kinds of coaching in just a second. But you know, the business world has been actively consuming and practicing coaching skills and coaching, executive coaching, for close to 20 years now. And there's all kinds of studies that show that it's very great return on investment, and it shows, you know, we can really help people develop their own capacity when we use this kind of relationship with them. Like, we've studied it, we know it works. We also know that there's a set of competencies, a set of behaviors that you should be utilizing when you're coaching. And you don't want to mix these two things up, or it gets confusing, which I guess is why I can't try to decouple them. So what's a coach? Well, you know, they're prompting self-discovery. As I said earlier, that is the fundamental things. I'm coming towards you to help you get to know you. It's not about what I think. It's really about me helping you to express yourself and explore your wants, needs, behaviors, etc. So that's, you know, I'm prompting your self-discovery. I'm trying to have you find what is your right answer. It's a relationship, over time, typically, you know, like a formal relationship. So one of my nuggets for you today, this morning, the hour that we have, is to make explicit the role that you're doing with other people. And when you're the recipient, to come into the conversation and say, you know, Dr. So-and-so, what I need from you right now is some coaching. Say it out loud so Dr. So-and-so knows what role they're in, right? Versus, Dr. So-and-so, what I really need from you is some mentoring. Please tell me, how do I go, what's your advice about how I should go about in the next phase of my career? I'll take it in. I may get mentored more actively. You may help me make introductions. And that's just a different thing than me saying, I'm not actually sure what I want to be doing. Can you help me talk it through? Relationships are transformational for people. Like when we listen to each other, people grow. When we actually slow down and listen, you know, it's like for all the complexity in life right now, this is what we're trying to teach people. So let's go back to the beginning. We want to listen to people, like you listen to your patients, or the patient's parents, right? People in this room. But we frequently forget to listen to our colleagues, you know, or to our junior investigators. We think we're listening, but we're not really listening. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about power dynamics, because sometimes you have to do particular things to get people to talk openly to you so that you can actually listen, right? So if they don't talk, it's pretty hard to listen, right? So you're both sitting there going, okay, what are we doing here? Okay? All right. So let's do the exercise. I'd like you to, your newfound friend sitting next to you, to think about someone in your life who helped you. So anybody that, like somebody without whom you wouldn't be sitting here in this great research hospital, right? You wouldn't have achieved the success that you've achieved. Think of one specific person, not the generalized tableau of everyone. One person who helped you, without whom you wouldn't be here. What did they do with you? How did you feel in their presence? So deconstruct a little bit. What is it that this person who helped me was doing with me or feeling with me? And how did I feel with them? And that's the conversation I'd like you to have with your partner here. Just pick one, and now reflect about them. Those of you who are really self-aware can actually have a set of sensations that get elicited as you remember, and just bathe in that happy place. And then tell the person next to you the story of this person. You'll have about 10 minutes to do this, so it's not like, exhausting. Just come up with what were the behaviors, the attitudes, the actions that they did with you and how you felt in the present. Have at it. When you're listening, actively listen. Management of your mood. And so one of the great things about coaching or mentoring or is that we can bring this positive state, emotional state, to ourselves and to each other. So arguably, if you were paying attention to the dynamics between the two of you, your mood was uplifted by the other person speaking of a story of someone who helped them in their life. That's the limbic resonance, the limbic connection that we have an energy system that runs between human beings. So part of being a great coach is being able to manage your own mood and bring positive emotions to bear into these relationships. You can do that if you can learn to manage your mood in this sort of way with intention. So I'm not even talking about what you say or own behaviors in. I'm saying about what is your own intentional state, psychological state, emotional state, when you go towards somebody that you want to talk to. The challenge for leaders everywhere, everybody in this room and lots of other places, is that you have an analytic approach to life, which you need in order to be a great clinician or researcher. You've got to be analytic. If you take the analytic mindset without any shift in state, and then you try to coach somebody, it's not going to work. It's going to become mentoring, advice giving, kind of room. You should do this, like how complicated can this be? Right? And then the other person feels not heard. They feel told, which, again, as I said earlier, may be perfectly appropriate for some conversations. But for other ones, when you want to bring out the best in somebody, you want to be that person who helped them in the future, right? You have to change your state and your approach. Is this making any sense? Yes? Okay, so we are complicated creatures. And so now tell me, when the people who helped you, what kinds of things did they do? What came up in your conversations? What did you hear yourself or your partner say about these people who helped you?
Taking an interest when it wasn't necessarily expected.
They took an interest when it wasn't expected. Almost always what comes up is people saying, they saw potential in me that I didn't see in myself. That's very powerful. What else did they do? They gave you confidence by their attention? Yep. Or they some cheerleading? Yep. Yes?
Helped navigate life-work balance.
They helped you navigate work-life balance. Yeah. Yes?
They sometimes took me out of my comfort zone.
They stretched you, out of your comfort zone. And with some support, you could build confidence. Yes, they trusted you. You want me to- They trusted you. They trusted you, right? Yes.
You seem to enjoy helping.
Yes, they enjoyed helping you, yes. That's a big one. So again, it goes back to our state, right, and our motivation for helping people. Like, are we doing it because we're supposed to? or we have to. It's our role expectation. People can feel that. Yes.
She was willing to meet me where I was, and she didn't know something. Instead of always being the I know person.
Right. So she adjusted her.
She needed to stretch a little between for, some of the
Right. Which probably made it feel more mutual. Right. Yes.
My partner told me that the person who influenced him expanded the focus of his request. He wanted a clinical attachment. He took him to research.
You stretched it. Yeah. Yes. Good. All right. Now back to your partners for a second conversation. This will be shorter, but just trying to see if you can parse out in the realm of the people in your life who've helped you. When someone was being more of a coach, and by coaching I mean also a coaching leadership style, and so it's not necessarily the formal role of coach, but they were kind of bringing out the best in you, like what this first conversation, and versus when they were mentoring, right? See if you can have a conversation about what's the difference really between the mentoring approach and the coaching approach in your own life experience. Does that make sense? So we're working on it. All right, so 5 minutes on this, so what is the mentoring different?
So what we're saying is that mentoring to a reasonable extent is a bit informal. Very informal, and most times you feel more relaxed, more comfortable. And most people choose their mentors. When I hear coaching, it strikes me as something that is more structured, more formal, and your coaches are usually chosen for you by others. And you have like measures that you have to meet. So I feel more comfortable with coaching. I feel more comfortable with mentoring.
Okay.
Now, the other question that comes to my mind, which I don't know if it's appropriate to pick it up now, is that I want you to also look at role model. How does it come into, how do you interwoven mentoring, coaching, role model? But for someone like me, if I look around and I tell myself, who is it that has influenced me so much? Who has mentored me? I've had a few people, but I think I achieved more because I looked up to someone who I saw as a role model. And there wasn't a defined, active, participatory engagement. But I always looked up to that person. Oh, look at how this guy has done this. That's the way I want to do it. And I think that's what got me to where I am. I don't know how. I can talk a little bit more about role model.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's a great thing to bring up. Let me just hear a few other people, then I'll come back to that. Yes.
I'm a neurologist, so I sort of think of it in a very different perspective. And I thought it was contrasting between neurology and psychiatry. And I think the psychiatrist sort of helps you bring out your own feelings. So people like a coach, lie on the couch and let's discuss this, bring it out. Whereas the neurologist says, this is what you got, and this is what you need to take.
Right.
So that's one way of looking at it. It's a little warped, I think.
Well, see, we're trying to start a movement so that we can't only rely on the psychiatrists. Because otherwise I'll be very busy trying to bring out the best in others. But that's a great analogy, right? In some case, you are clinicians. It's easy to see, you're trained to see what someone should do, or what, diagnose the creature, right? And then come up with a solution. And so, as I said earlier, part of the challenge here is just shifting the stake and saying, yes, while I may have thoughts and opinions about what this person should do, it's not for me to tell always, but tell them. I want them to discover it on their own. Doesn't mean you never tell them, but it's the distinction that we're trying to get. What up? How about over here? You guys, yes. Back.
I just came back from vacation. I think a mentor, they give you a guidebook and say, read it. And a coach is like, they give you the guidebook and say, well, where do you want to go? Oh, well, you need to take this training, go here, or how do you want to figure out how to go there? It's all about this, how they present the information, how they help you understand the information.
Listen.
Yeah, like the coach is, he or she's going to help you understand it understanding obstacles, and also understand your own personality characteristics, and not just put you in a round hole.
Right.
And the other ironic thing is the ACCEL Mentoring Education Career Development Board. Maybe we should need to change this to the ACCEL Coaching Education Career Development Board. Because what you're saying is maybe we don't need mentors, we need coaches.
Or should they be
Semantics.
informal, or should they be formal? This is a question for you to ask. Yes, let's hear from some other people.
Well, I think actually when I think about the couple people that have been most valuable to me, they've actually served the role of both, that they sort of helped me with what my path is, and then they help me figure out what I want my path to be, and then help me lay out the program together. And they serve both roles. And I think that was, I think at different times in life, we need different things, and I think these particular people actually sort of really excelled in doing both.
Right, so they had the flexibility to do both. I'm just curious, did they tend to be explicit about when they were doing one versus the other?
And they didn't label it as now I'm coaching you versus now I'm mentoring you, but I think it was sort of a structured conversation of let's talk about where you want to go, and then once I was sort of able to articulate with some probing questions what exactly I wanted, then based on that they said, okay, well here's a roadmap. How to get there.
Here's some ideas.
Yeah.
You brought the word structure up, you brought the word structure up. Often coaching, the process of it is more structured, and there's some safety in structuring, right? So it's less, there's some, we know everybody will get some attention, as opposed to leaving it in sort of the free market. You know, some people get mentored and coached and other people don't. You know, because of what? Because of chemistry, because of are they not assertive enough, or whatever. So sometimes when you want to have a more formal, whether it's mentoring or coaching, process so that everybody gets touched somehow. And you're not leaving it just to the assertiveness of the less powerful person. I'm going to talk about power dynamics in this. Yes?
When you just brought up power dynamics,
Yeah.
I was going to say,
I think a lot of the time the people who are mentoring us are in a position of power over us, or someone we very deeply respect, or is very prominent in the field that we are trying to enter. So it can be very hard to not take their advice. So what I've found to be very helpful with one person in particular is he would always say at the beginning of the conversation, this is me giving advice to you, and I'm going to tell you what I think, but you need to do what's best for you. And then he would go on and give me very concrete advice that I didn't always agree with, but it sort of gave me an out to say, you can disagree with this and not follow this, and I will still continue to mentor you.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful.
Yeah, that very, very, very good. To name the dynamic. And that is really, because that can help surface another difference between mentoring and coaching. The coach isn't holding a huge should. You know, like you should do this. If you're in that mentor, sometimes it's hard to defy your mentor. Like that can be politically challenging in a small world of neurologists or psychiatrists or, you know, or clinicians of the sort that you want to be. So we want to have conversations like this with the mentors, with the people on who have more power to say, you know, be careful with your advice, right? And be careful with your feelings about people when they do or don't follow your advice. Like notice that that's your feelings, not theirs, right? And they should have some freedom to do what they want to do in their careers. Now this is a place where, you know, things have changed in the last 50 years in healthcare in terms of how much freedom you have, you know, or how much we allow. I don't even want to get into that, but I'm sure that that's in the minds of some of you, like, hey, I never had any freedom. I had to do what my mentor told me, you know, and it worked for me, so why would we change the rules, right? So we're talking about adding more awareness on the part of both the recipient of the coaching, mentoring, whatever, and also the offerer. I want to get back to role modeling because it's so important, which is also the message to all of you in this room that are somebody's mentor or somebody's coach right now, because everybody is, you know, even if you don't think you have any power, you're having an impact on people. My whole expertise is about emotional intelligence, and I go on about that. The best and only way, really, to teach emotional intelligence to other people is to model it. Because we watch how people in power behave. So people in power need to be very self-aware and notice that they're having an impact on people. Even if they, so hopefully they say things like, you don't have to follow my advice. But you know, if they, even if they do that, you're still going, oh, you know, should I follow his advice or her advice or not? You know, because we are wired to pay attention to people in power for all kinds of mammalian reasons, right? We are mammals, and they take care of us, and they don't want to get kicked out of the profession, and you know, we get very anxious and very attuned to people in power. So my message is like, people in power, you people in power, be aware of your behavior and your attitude. So even if you're saying, you don't have to take my advice, if you're saying it like, you really have to take my advice, although I'm saying you don't have to take my advice, because that's like so the politically correct thing I'm supposed to say, but the real underlying message is, you're going to take my advice. That's all the subtext, right? And this part of us human, we read the subtext. So modeling really does matter. And so be thoughtful about how you are modeling what it means to help the development of other people in healthcare, because that's what healthcare does. I mean, you guys are very complicated and very layered and very relational way of growing up the next generation. I like that about you, because you were very relational. You know, there's a lot of relationships. So you want to be thoughtful about how am I modeling what it is like to be the chief of something. You know, to be the person with expertise. And it's just a constant state of mindfulness is what really, you know, at the very end of, you know, an hour and a half, what can I say? It's being that aware of what is the nature of this relationship, how should this conversation go? And being more explicit on both parties' part, so that you can navigate that complexity. Yes? Oh, sorry, I'm going to go back here and then I'll come back.
That's you describing the
I've been, you know, incredibly lucky to have great people who are, you know, sort of classic examples of, you know, both coach and mentor. And if I had a magic wand or, you know, a couple wishes on there would be that I could be the kind of person that would really be both and be able to know when to be a mentor and know when to be a coach and apply that in a mindful and effective way. I guess I just want to say out loud, I think that when we describe these things sometimes, it can seem like coaching is the better and that mentoring is somehow bad. And I want to maybe defend a little bit mentoring. And one, you know, as a person who at different phases in my career has been, you know, I've been desperate for just give me your best guess because I don't know. You know, and I have also made some mistakes in that like I tend to be a coach and I feel like in a way that's so much more comfortable, right? What should I do? Well, what do you think you should do? You know, what do you feel? Like, let's look at this. You know, it's not as risky, right? If I am gonna really mentor and sort of own that I might have some expertise and maybe do that thing where I'm seeing something in you that you don't see in yourself, there's a risk in that, and that I'm giving advice. Like I'm sort of saying, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, the classic example, the mistake that I think of is, you know, with residents who come to me to ask to be mentored in research, you know, and I, you know, spend a lot of time trying to understand their passion and maybe redirect their passion, you know, away from doing this, you know, randomized controlled trial of like something that they didn't even do the literature review on yet. They just really care about, you know, and I've wasted time. You know, they have a limited amount of time. My time is limited. My energy is limited, and I've learned to be like, no, you're not going. You know, no, we're not going to do a randomized controlled trial. No, that's not happening. You know, or you know, this is the better way to do it because it's more scientifically sound. And it fits better with your time, you know, your time frame and your goals. You know, so I think that it's, you know, sometimes you do have to do that. You have to be willing to sort of say, here's what I think.
Absolutely.
You don't have to take it, but I'm going to tell you. Because I think you don't have to listen to me, but I think you're making a mistake, kind of.
Right. Well, you know, there are 6 leadership styles, right? We should all have the ability to do 6 of them. You mentioned 2. One is the coaching leadership style. So I'm flexing in this moment, I'm gonna try to get this person to figure out what kind of researcher they wanna be. Or, hey, you know, have you done the lit review? Can be a question. There's also the directing style, which is, hey, my time is limited until you do that lit review. I'm not gonna have this conversation. In like joyful way. Okay, bye. I'm moving on. So yes, mentoring is assertive. It's like, I care, I see something in you, and here's the path. And there are people in this room that are desperate for that clarity, right? It's just not the only thing all the time. And really, I think the message around this relationship is to get the people to be clear about what they want in a given moment, right? So I want the subordinate, less powerful person to say, I need mentoring, right? And then I want the powerful person to say, okay, here's another risk. You mentioned one risk. The other risk is that you don't have time to mentor everybody. So sometimes we avoid mentoring because we don't want to exclude the other person, right? How come she got a mentor and I didn't? So that's another terrain, part of this cultural terrain in any system. How do you manage that? And how are you managing your biases? Do a whole session on that. Like, how come some people get mentored and some people don't? Right? So we're going to make it systematic so everybody gets a mentor? No, we're not. Systematic so everybody gets a coach, or you get this coaching leadership style in addition to being told. Other comments? Yeah.
I mean, some of it is that I work with people who tend to be very, very early career.
Yeah.
And I have people come to me for mentoring about how to do something, but they don't actually know what they're getting themselves into. And if you look at their situation, you know they're on the wrong path. And the right answer is actually shifting it to a coaching situation when they're coming to you for mentoring. And I've definitely been shocked an awful lot of very early career people just to really get them to say, no, you don't get a PhD because you want to be a patent attorney. When you hate research, you need to go look at things in other ways. And sometimes it's like being saying something really honest and then getting them to be willing to accept coaching. Because very often people think the path they're on may be the best when they're kind of going off into a really bad direction, and getting them to at least be willing to think about being coached to maybe a different way to get to the same.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that, and knowing when to do that versus knowing when to just answer their bleeding question and go on, that's a really tricky place to be, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I didn't know if you had any advice about, maybe the best way to make that transition. It's one thing like if you've already, finished your residency in neurology, hopefully you really want to be a neurologist, right? And that your career path is a career of being a neurologist. But I deal with people who are like, they went to college because they wanted to go to medical school, and that might not be the best path forward for them, and to try to get them to open up their horizons and knowing when to do that.
Well, I mean, the only thing I would say is that in different, so you identify their there's a development phase, right? Coaching generally is a developmental act, right? So what is the nature of the conversation that we need to have? So in your packets, just so I don't forget, there are things about questions and there are things about listening. There's a sheet of paper about provocative questions. Then all of you, everybody can expand their repertoire about how to ask questions other than what do you think or how do you feel, right? So that can elicit self-awareness on the part of the other. So you want to, like, it's like sort of a due diligence. Like, let's talk about why you're here. That's a very risky conversation for some people because they just invested $100,000 into a career path. And their parents are telling them, and they always want to be a doctor or whatever it is, and suddenly they're living the dream, and it turns out not to be what they expected. That's a very precious situation, and I would hope that you would hold it carefully. So that's why it's sometimes hard to get people to talk, because they don't want to become aware of that. The implications are very big, very huge. So, ideally, you're that person who helped them inside the context of that kind of relationship. They will come to their own awareness and then, really then start to ask you advice. So phase 1 is awareness generating. Phase 2 is, okay, now what do I do? So actually in that case, you coach and then you mentor, right? So it's not as if you're different human beings. Just you guys need to know when is the right behavior set. Any other questions? Karen, Bernie? I don't know. Talk more and I'll open it up again. But let's talk so, let's actually focus on coaching for a second. You get the message that it's about self-discovery. It's also about accountability, so that last point, coaches help people hold them accountable and responsible for their own actions. You said you were going to do X. Here it is. Did you do X? That's fully inside the bailiwick. It's not all about, just love. It's also accountability. And that, sometimes we need that from people. And then I think that's also a place where it can be different from mentoring, where like I give you the advice and whether you do it or not is up to you. But if I'm trying to coach you, I kind of follow back up and say, hey, you said you wanted to do something. Did you do it? And when it comes to clinical research and things like that, helping to foster efficacy and getting people to be able to follow through and do the lit review and go to that meeting and step up and make a presentation, that's the good habits that you're building with a sports coach or something. There are different types of coaching, so not only do you have to decide what's the difference between mentoring and coaching, what are you doing? What kind of coaching are you doing with them? So you can ask yourself that. What do they need in this moment? If I'm teaching them a procedure, it's skill coaching. Right? Yes. Hi.
I think that this group may or may not be aware that there are actually professional organizations for trained and certified coaches. Yeah. And you're starting to go down a slippery slope of skill building, which is Price model of mentoring in medicine. And I'm hearing some confusion about, it's not that we're trying to convince anybody to coach here, it's just to make awareness, the difference and the roles and how mentors coach. But if you're actually seeking coaching from somebody or a professional, they should not be your mentor. It's not a back and forth relationship equally between the two. But a mentor absolutely will coach us more than the top.
Well, I'm actually just wondering why isn't skills coaching mentoring? I don't see
What's the difference?
What you just described as skills coaching to me is exactly what a mentor does.
Okay.
So I don't see
There's no distinction. Right, okay. So let's set that one aside for here. Let's look at the top two, So leadership coaching, which we haven't even talked about. But that's self-development, how do I navigate complex systems? How do I manage these relationships? How do I speak up to people in power? What is my personal presence? These are all, that would all be, I'd have to be more in the coaching realm than the mentoring realm. Career clarity coaching that we were talking about earlier, definitely, like, are you in the right field? Do you want to shift? What's going to be your portfolio of expertise? That would be in the coaching category. There's life coaching and all that other stuff, leads to the psychiatrists. Right? How do I navigate my, I want to talk about this last thing, this last idea. How do I navigate the professional realm and the identity? So identity development, also a big area of coaching. It's totally different than mentoring. Like, what does it mean to be a clinician? What does it mean to work here? What does it mean to, go from being a subordinate to being a leader? That's an identity shift. What does it mean to be a doctor? I put on the jacket. What does that mean? Those conversations don't happen very much, often. It's the identity conversation as opposed to the what should I do conversation. So the psychological conversation is how do I become this thing that I said that I wanted to be. Did that distinction go around here? Okay. All right, so this is a research about power dynamics, basically. And this is important for you to know because there's a dynamic at play in any interpersonal relationship that is about power And there are certain ways that you can do yourself as a leader, as a more powerful person that will either elicit participation by the other or shut it down. You know this, right? The question is, how aware are you of it at any given moment? So what we know about followers, so to speak, is that they are highly attuned to this goes to role modeling, highly attuned to you. They know more about you than many times you know about yourself, because they're studying you, they're watching you, they're figuring you out so that they can get what they want from you, or they can remain safe, or whatever it is. So think about yourself at different stages of your career, or even yourself right now. There may be people that have more power that you want to understand, right? They are much more sensitive than the people with power about emotions. So they might think something went disastrously in a meeting, you know? Even kind of get agitated or tear up, male or female, doesn't matter. And you're like, what happened? And it just like, they're totally not attuned to the emotionality of the situation. Well, as you increase your sensitivity and your own self-awareness, then you're going to mitigate that difference. They are more likely to perceive threats. So if you're having a casual conversation and they interpret something that you say as more threatening than you remotely mean it. So that's a little version of the mentor conversation around you should take my advice. And you really could be in the mentor stance, like genuinely saying, no, it's your decision, but they're reading the subtext as something different because of the power dynamic. Oh, I can't say no to her. She's done so much for me, following her advice. People with less power experience many more negative emotions. So what's that? That's anxiety, fear, depression, upset. When you have power, you are less likely to experience negative emotions. So you're going through life in a very different way. So sometimes we can't really empathize with the work on empathy. We have to remember what it was like to be them in our own experience. That's empathy. Because without that intentional act, we can really not be attuned to the people with less power and not understand how hard it is for them to talk to us, for instance. Does this make sense? Right? They tend to talk, so lower power people tend to talk and contribute less. And then again, if you're not this mindful leader that I'm trying to get you to be all the time, and stress is a mitigator, you'll be like, why don't they speak, why doesn't she speak up? You need to speak up more, right? And that, while that is also true, it is not, if you don't consider the power dynamic, you're missing, we're acting as if things are all equal for all people. Like, I have no trouble speaking up when I'm in power. So you'll see my next slide is what happens for powerful people. Well, they talk more, they contribute more, and we give them all the airspace, and they take it. So learning, learning to not just take it, but to create conditions where the opposite happens. So what happens with leaders or people with power, more power? Decreased sensitivity to consequences and punishment. Walking through life feeling that things are pretty okay. Increased sensitivity to rewards, increased positive emotions, feels pretty good, and they talk and dominate more. Okay, so given this context, this isn't the only thing I wanted to talk about. How does this impact your mentoring or your coaching? Like, what do you have to do? On both sides, right? So what should the mentee, coachee do? And what should the mentor or coach do, given what this research shows around the impact of power? What do you think? What works for you? Just use your own life experience, right? So when you're setting up, when you're at your best, right? You're going to have a conversation with a junior faculty person. What do you want to do? Or you are the junior faculty person. What helps you? Have the kind of conversation you want to have. We had one example, which is to say, hey, you don't have to take my advice. This is what I would suggest. Yes.
So, I think we learned from our
So I think that as when you're in a position of power, you really have to put yourself in the other person's shoes and really understand the various things that you list there. If you're really helpful, because if you come off as this big powerful person, telling them what they should do, it's just quite simply not going to work. And even if they don't say anything, and the young woman would be favorite, right? She told me that I told her, even though I had no idea at the time. And so it was lesson learned. So you learn from experiences and get better.
Yeah, right, great. Yeah, pass it back.
So you're giving that example, made me think of one thing that I tend to do is, if somebody wants to make the same mistake that I've made before, I tell them the story about what happened when I did that. So then I'm not telling them what to do, but they can hear what the consequences of doing that might be.
Right. Yeah, owning it yourself, my story, right? You're telling your story.
I know I've had to learn to control the situation, to not totally guard what I'm saying and guard my facial expressions, but to be able to say, to look at the situation and be able to turn it so that a very negative situation with a patient could turn into something that's very positive.
So reframing. Yeah. Okay. Good. Sure.
When I think about my training and my career development, the mentors or the people that stand out were the tough ones. And when I was a resident, I had to present all of my cases to the chairman of the department, and he was tough. But we all wanted his praise, and it pushed us to be better. And when I think about my first research mentor, who really was instrumental in shaping my career, her expectations were high, and she let me go out on my own, but I wanted, again, to do well because I wanted her praise. And that's, saying something about me, and my uniqueness. But when I think, I don't think of the softness of my most influential mentors. I think about their toughness. And sometimes when I'm talking to residents, if anything, I'm an introductory coach. I feel that toughness coming through because that's where I come from, even though I'm a pretty soft person. So I'm trying to figure out how to work that.
Well, I think there's a difference between toughness and high standards. I mean, there's like, if you're unpacking this word tough, tough is okay, right? Tough is okay, but too much tough has people freeze. And there are some situations where we need to have people learn to, think quickly in light of the situations which you guys have here, right? So we want that toughness and that quick thinking, but not all the time and exclusively in terms of an approach to trying to work with the complexities of all these different people, right? If you are modeling, great high standards and great care, great, practice, people will want your praise. So that's the other thing about people in power. Don't forget you're in power, and that's a good thing. But just know how you manage it intentionally. Manage it intentionally. You can be tough and friendly. You can be tough and concerned. You can, so one way to do this coaching mentoring thing is to segment it out, right? And have development conversations. And go for a walk around the place and just listen to people and use the listening skills and the provocative questions and kind of get to know people. That doesn't mean you're not tough, right? And then you switch gears, right? Then now we're in the rounds or in the rotations. I'm here to teach you. I'm going to have very high standards. The fact that you know them will actually elicit more loyalty to you, right? Than if you don't know them at all and you're just tough, right? Then if you're just tough, then you're relying on the subordinate, like you said, maybe it's just me, right? And not everybody is wired like you to want to be that high achieving. You know what I mean? So if you do this relational thing and then you add toughness, you're going to get more people, not just have the high achieving people. You had a question?
I was going to say that one of the things that has worked for me, I don't really okay. One of the things that seems to work for me and makes me feel more comfortable as the mentor is to have this sense of leveling the playing field early on in the relationship. So one is letting the trainee understand that they have exceptional skills, training, and that they've come through an amazing educational experience that brings them right to this level. And then I'm reminded by how I was when I was at their stage and all the mistakes that I made, and sharing those mistakes with them as a way of saying, we're just at different levels of experience. And I think that's really important because I think it's hard to be a trainee in this day and time. It's much, much more difficult than it was for folks in my age or stage.
Why?
Because there's less today. There's less, there's a scarcity in terms of funding. There's more competition in terms of publication. And there's a meanness that we have today that I don't think was around as much. Probably the scarcity of fear. So I really like your words around mindfulness. Thank you.
I mean, this is a bit of a segue soon to your stress conversation. When people are under a lot of stress, so whether the subordinate or the person with more power, we get brittle. And so I think creating these moments of mindfulness or good, little pockets of a safe relationship. People thrive when they feel psychologically safe. And that can happen inside these relationships. We just know this about humans, right? So the research is all there. We don't thrive when we're being here and there.
But I guess my question is that where does, I very supportive of all these things, but you also have the other side that you already mentioned is accountability, right? And there is a place where, I have definitely dealt with people where all the mentoring, all the coaching in the world, in the end, they don't follow through because and it can be a whole host of reasons. It can be just because of their ability to deal with life, their professionalism, or in some cases mental health challenges. There has to be a place where that breaks. And it's very, very hard to know where that is. I don't know advice about where the mentoring is the accountability interface.
Well, I would step back and say I can hold you accountable, and you can be accountable to me if I've shared expectations. And part of a good mentor or coach helps people read the environment. What is expected of us in this environment? And is explicit about it. And that is part of this kind of toughness or accountability. Like, just tell me the rules first. And then I'll try to rise to the occasion or not. But then I can have
or not.
Or not.
There's a percentage of very often what you're saying works, but there's a percentage of people who cannot rise to the occasion.
Okay, so I would say one due diligence is make sure that you pass this person off to someone else too. So you take out of the equation your own bias and whatever, right? They remind me of my sister, and so I can't coach or mentor this person. I have to own that I'm making up stories about this person, or I'm not at my best. So let me at least take them for 6 months, and then we'll see if they are going to really fail out. Like it's not just one person's point of view.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. Okay. There's a lot of great conversation here. One of the key things I think for junior people that are starting to do more mentoring that plays for those in articulating the expectations is making sure you know what you're capable of doing and what your skill set is, and all of us have limitations. And if something comes up that you are not ready to handle or don't know how to handle, don't just try to figure it out. Everybody has a mentor, and we're building mentoring communities actually in the state. There are ways that you can try to find other people. So I think it's circling all the way back around. The expectations up front are sort of not necessarily in their best interest to think that, well, they're already at that level. And judging that just takes a little bit of practice and time. But in general, that's one of the strategies I use up front, is talking about I've made all these mistakes. Yeah. Way more mistakes than you're ever going to make. The other thing that I do, and this is where the question comes in, is when I sense that there's a difficulty in the relationship, I try to flip things back to why we're even here. What's the question that drove the initial interaction? What is it that got the mentee jazzed about the technique or the patient population or the research question, and get back to that? And that seems to often reset things. But I don't know if you have other suggestions that if you sense that there's a power dynamic problem, how can you reset it and get things back to it?
Oh, well, so I mean, so power dynamics is, what I would build on what you were saying is this, and what you're saying, is the narration of I'm a continuous learner too, right? So that's where you can join. Everybody's learning, I'm still learning, I've made mistakes. Don't give your power away, right? You don't want to, because that makes people nervous too. Like, she's talking to me like she and I are just exactly the same, that she's been doing this for 30 years, and it doesn't jive, right? So you got to own your power and be able to relate. To reset, yes, going back to purpose, passion, purpose, people love that. It brings out positive emotions. It helps me take in accountability. Why? Oh, remember, we're here to learn to do this thing so we can save children, right? So I can hold you accountable to very high standards because of children. Constant re-narration about that, because it reframes and contextualizes why I'm then going to hold you accountable. So then generally this works. That's why people are here. The other thing, and just to segue to my tool, and then because I'm sitting over the time, to be able to reset in the book. I have this thing I just wanted to offer to you guys. It's really simple, but can transform relationships in terms of getting the conversation started. It's called the influence map, basically. So when you are in either role, if you can you can't read that, but it's in your manual. If you can answer these questions, you will come more prepared to the interaction, and they will too. So you might say to them, hey, fill out the influence map, and then come and talk to me. The first and most important question is, what is the outcome that you want from this exchange, whether it's this meeting or this relationship? I want to be developed, or I want clarity about the path forward so that I can be the great researcher clinician that you are. I need to know what you want. And too often, we leave it unsaid. And then both parties are kind of guessing. And we fill in the blanks with our imagination about what you want, right? So that's that first column, is the outcome. What is it? How would I measure success from this relationship or from this meeting? Maybe I just want you to agree to meet with me again, just to get more transparent about what, and co-create this relationship together. And then do the relationship. So this, let's start by talking about what we're here to do. And who am I and who are you? So the other column is the context. So this is the context of either the meeting or the profession, or it could be from wide to small. But I'm meeting you. What's our context? People, self, and then actions. The people is the other person. So what do I want from, what do I know about you? How do you like to communicate? What conflict styles do you have? Everything. If I can fill it out, like I'm going to talk to you, I want to know who you are, so I can then, that will evoke empathy. And then the other column is me. Like, how do I feel in this relationship? Right now, do I feel strong? Do I feel passive? Am I excited? Am I disengaged? I need to take responsibility for myself. Because then maybe I need to do some self-work before I come into the relationship, the meeting or whatever it is. If on the power side, answering that column will have you ask yourself, who do they remind me of? What are my hopes and dreams for this person? How come I don't have any hopes and dreams for this person? So it's a little planning tool, basically. And what it'll do for you is raise up and make more transparent these process questions that we've been talking about for an hour and a half. Am I a mentor today, or my coach, or what do you want? want from me? Is it, are we here in this moment, or are we here for 3 months, or, you know, let's get clear, do it together, agree. You are then evoking efficacy on the part of the other person. They have to take responsibility for what they want out of this relationship. Does that make sense? I mean, I could do a 3-day class on it. This is like the 30-second version. So people say it really helps them. So I wanted to give it to you as that.
Can I have a question?
That's it, yes.
So how would you use this, like, when there's no chemistry between the mentor and the mentee? How would you use that?
My advice, when there's no chemistry, two things is start there. Like, if you got to generate some chemistry here somehow. And usually, like a developmental walk or getting to know people a little bit more, it will help you find common ground. So you got to like seek common ground if you can. The other piece is it takes a lot of self-management to work with people that you don't have chemistry with. So I've coached tons and tons of people, and there are many that I like, some that like I don't get at all. I have to work really hard to get into their shoes. It's all about empathy. Like, what would it be like to be this person? And if I do that, and when I do that, I end up like really relating. I can find pieces of me that somehow relate, and I can run with them from there. And it's just really hard to do, right? So, and the practical thing is hand them off, if you can. Because no chemistry will not make for happy souffles, usually. Anything else?
How about everybody join me in thanking Professor Johnston?